Part 107. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1061. Chapter 1061. Who did it? The people outside the door originally thought that the Lee family would not open the door at most, but they never expected that when the door opened, a vicious dog greeted the guests. The maids and women screamed in fear. They all crowded into the carriage and shivered without caring about the difference between master and servant. Even the coachman rushed up to the shaft and kept hopping. Fortunately, the horses were frightened and started to run away, finally carrying everyone and escaping from the street where Lee's house was. As soon as the Lee family boy knocked on the rice bowl, the big dogs obediently retreated. The few idlers who happened to watch the excitement were left at the end of the street, eager to get into the cracks in the wall, for fear that they would also become the targets of vicious dogs. So, within a short period of time, the news spread again that the Lee family was rude and unleashed vicious dogs to her people. Of course, there must be a reason for letting a dog bite someone. When they heard that someone was coveting Princess Kangal and planning to marry into the Lee family to ensure safety, everyone suddenly realized. No wonder the Lee family is like this. Every family will be annoyed if their daughter is cared for so much. What's more, Princess Kangal is the darling of the Lee family, with bright eyes and a sharp heart. The Lee family's letting the dogs bite people is a minor offense. Someone mentioned it privately and said, "Just wait and see, the Lee family will definitely not be able to just let dogs bite people." But some people disagree. "I'm just asking for marriage, if it doesn't work out, what else can the Lee family do?" Amid the divergent opinions, everyone is waiting to see. At this moment, in Highland Palace, the third princess felt that her sister had been bullied, and she rolled up her arms and sleeves angrily. "Who dares to be my brother-in-law if he has the heart of a bear and the courage of a leopard? Tie him up and let me hit him 100 times. I'm really tired of living, all kinds of monsters are jumping out." Jiyan was not angry at all. Although he had not expected this, it was normal after thinking about it. Nowadays, Zindu is like a big ship. When a storm comes and people are about to be tossed into the sea, they naturally try their best to stay on the ship. The Lee family, a low-key and stable presence sitting in the middle of the boat, has naturally become the target of many people. And she is the adopted daughter of the Marquis of Zinting, a good friend of the three princesses, and can even call the emperor uncle. Anyone who marries into the family is equivalent to getting a gold medal to avoid death. Okay, don't be angry. In a few days, the storm will pass, and there won't be such ridiculous things anymore. She pulled the third princess to sit down and persuaded her. Besides, this is a good thing. It means that this girl is so beautiful that everyone is vying for her. The third princess looked her up and down several times, wanting to start mocking her, but it was a little unconscionable. I have to say, women have undergone extraordinary changes. Jiyan was a chubby boy when he was little, and he was so adorable. But now she has grown into a beautiful girl, with elegant eyebrows and beautiful inner beauty. No matter how she looks at her, she is attractive to people. The most important thing is that there is a strange feeling of comfort and peace around her. If you marry such a good girl, I'm afraid every man will wake up from a dream. That's it, that's all. I don't care, you're so smart, I won't bother with you if you get wrinkles, you won't be as beautiful as you. After saying that, she quickly called Kaiun to send her a mirror, and then took the trouble to look at it. The second day was the small court meeting. As soon as the emperor sat down on the dragon throne, the censor came out and complained severely. There were 5 or 6 defendants, including the Minister of Civil Affairs. The charges include oppressing the people, seizing people's land, and even bullying men and women. In short, there are all kinds of crimes, and the evidence is conclusive. Although these are not necessarily capital crimes, they are enough to make these people miserable and end their official career. The emperor knew very well that these people were not on the list of people to be eliminated. But the prey that came to his door still deserved it, and he naturally wouldn't let it go. After punishment, official positions are vacated, which is a good time to rearrange reliable personnel. So, no matter how much they cried out for injustice, Chen Shilang and others were eventually taken down. Chen Shilang glared at Yushi Wen so hard that his eyes almost came out of their sockets. Wen Yushi sighed innocently. He really prepared the details, which were finalized together with Li Laoer and Lu Haiheng last night. The charges and evidence are complete. But who would have known that there would be just men who would launch an encirclement and suppression campaign without him taking action at all? Let alone Chen Shilang and others, he was more curious about whose handiwork this was. Outside the palace gate, the Li family's carriage was parked at the outermost edge. Li Laoer and Lu Haiheng, who had asked for leave due to illness, were hiding in the car drinking tea while waiting for Mr. Wen to come out. During this period, news came out that Chen Shilang and others were censored and punished. Lu Haiheng also praised with a smile, "Mr. Wen is really amazing, he can do it right away." Li Laoer yawned and replied, "The people at home have been busy all day and night. The evidence is conclusive, and the emperor will definitely punish him impartially. Fortunately, I have accumulated a lot of intelligence base over the years, which is now put to use." Lu Haiheng gave a thumbs up, sincerely impressed. "Many people often laugh at your family's lack of foundation, but if they knew that your family was the most well-informed in Zindu, they would be so surprised that they would be all over the place. It's so clever to pretend to be a pig and eat the tiger." Li Laoer waved his hands and said very modestly, "Our family is just trying to protect ourselves. After all, we are suddenly squeezed into the rich and powerful like you. We don't have any means. If we are sold someday, we will still have to count the money for others. It's true that we must be on guard against others." Lu Haiheng sighed, "I find it boring too. When Hyman and Jiaja grow up, I will go to your Sujintan to build a yard and enjoy themselves and retire. Okay, then we can soak in the hot springs and drink wine all day long. It will be so comfortable. If you have nothing to do, you can wear a straw hat and go see the melon fields." The two chatted and laughed, and soon they arrived at the end of the morning. Mr. Wen followed the crowd all the way out of the palace. As soon as he got on the carriage, he was warmly praised by Li Laoer and Lu Haiheng. As soon as Yushi Wen takes action, success will be immediate. That's right, let alone a young minister, even the ministers and princes are frightened by the news. Mr. Wen quickly waved his hands and said with a wry smile, "What we planned didn't work out." "Ah, that's impossible," Lu Haiheng pointed to the outside of the car and said in a low voice, "Didn't those people, Minister Chen, all go to Dali Temple?" Mr. Wen's expression became even weirder. "Someone took action before me. The three ministers Chen and Chen were imprisoned. It has nothing to do with me." Li Laoer and Lu Haiheng did not speak for a long time. These days, are there still people rushing to take revenge? Could it be the manpower left behind by Mr. Ho? Lu Haiheng guessed. Impossible, Li Laoer immediately shook his head. Muju is in charge of the Marquis' staff. Half of the evidence I have here was obtained by him. It is impossible to waste time and find someone else to take advantage of it. Let's go home first. Mr. Wen couldn't think of anything and quickly told Zheng He to drive back. It was safer to talk at home than outside. Not to mention how surprised the Li family was. Lu Zong also frowned and asked in the backyard of the Lu family, "Are you sure the person who wrote the book is not from the Earl's mansion?" "No, Prince. Wen Yushi didn't say anything at all, and our people didn't take any action either. It's indeed a third party." Lu Feng looked strange and asked cautiously, "Is there anyone else who can't bear to see the princess being bullied?" Lu Zong couldn't guess, and was a little irritated. When he was about to speak, a servant suddenly came in and reported, "Your Majesty, the imperial doctor from the palace is here again." Lu Zong's expression changed. He cursed lowly, feeling extremely regretful. Why did you lose your mind in the first place and find this bad excuse to delay getting married? It's a good thing now. It's hard to get off the tiger, so you're shooting yourself in the foot. He lay down on the bed with a dark face, gritted his teeth and ordered, "Come on." The first update today. There was an emergency that delayed the typing. Sorry, dear friends, we will resume the second update tomorrow. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, delayed flowering. Chapter 1062. Chapter 1062. The storm has finally arrived. Lu Feng felt distressed and amused at the same time. He tried his best to lower his head and endure it. He quickly walked to the secret door in the corner of the room and knocked twice. Soon, a doctor came out, took out a silver needle, and pricked Lu Zong's body skillfully. When the imperial doctor from the palace arrived, he made a routine inspection of the injury. He also had a grimace on his face and complained crazily in his heart. This Prince Lu is so unlucky. Even if he was kicked to a key position by a horse, why is he still so stubborn after being injured? It's been a few days and it's not getting better at all. It's still swollen like an eggplant. It's done. The direct lineage of the Lu family is almost extinct. But he thought so in his heart and did not dare to say it with his mouth. He smiled and consoled him, the prince's recovery is not bad. As long as he rests quietly and takes medicine well, he will definitely get better. Lu Zong seemed to be very shocked and could not help but wave his hands and said, "The imperial doctor does not need to come every day. I know my illness well. Let me rest in peace." The imperial doctor laughed dryly and did not refuse or agree. He doesn't want to run here every day. It's not because of the emperor's orders. When you go home tonight, you have to hold his beautiful concubine in your arms and wash your eyes. Not to mention that Lu Zong and the Li family were wondering who had taught Chen Shilang and others a lesson. But I have to say that the effect is excellent, and no one dares to take any chances with the Li family anymore. In fact, no one would be like this if they were not forced to act anxiously. After all, there have been lessons learned before. But in order to survive and to avoid capsizing in the wind and rain, you have to try it no matter what. You will die even if you try. That night, Ji Yin received the news. She was sitting on the roof with Muju, eating snacks and fruits, and admiring the not-so-full moon. Speaking of this, Muju felt puzzled and sighed, the current situation does not allow it. Otherwise, if we prepare for it for a few days and keep it, they will regret being born in this world. The good news stuffed him with a handful of meat, which made him feel touched and funny at the same time. She didn't know anything in the palace. Such a beautiful battle had been fought at home. And the 4 big dogs really helped. Next time you go home, remember to give them some delicious food. Is the imperial meeting tomorrow? Yes, Muju understood, and his tone was somewhat meaningful. After tomorrow, the wind and rain will stop. The good news is not so optimistic, not necessarily, but let's see, as we walk soldiers will stop us, and water will cover us. Yes, enjoy the beauty in front of you. Let's talk about the future later. Muju stretched her waist, and then held Ji Yin's soft little hand. Ji Yin gently shook his hand, raised the corners of his mouth, and said nothing. The warm wind blew through every corner of the palace. I saw too many calculations, darkness, and anxiety, but it was rare to have a bite of dog food here, so I wandered around quietly, refusing to leave. Dongfang did not wait to expose the fish belly white, and the Beijing officials above the 5 grades were busy going out. Wash and change clothes, put on court clothes, and make up for 2 snacks whenever possible, but don't dare to drink tea. After all, the emperor is talking and all the civil and military officials are making excuses. Who dares to ask for leave at this time to run to the toilet? I'm afraid the who is responsible for the ceremony will drag him away without gritting his teeth. Later, he will become famous in the new capital and be called a court official. It is embarrassing. Throw it to grandma's house. The sun had just jumped halfway out of the ground, and the palace was filled with carriages arriving one after another. Hundreds of civil and military officials gathered together and exchanged pleasantries in a low voice. After several previous impeachments and purges, everyone was a little numb, wondering who would be unlucky today. Occasionally, someone turned around and saw Li Lauer walking over, and quickly greeted him. "Oh, uncle, aren't you feeling well lately? Why are you here today?" Li Lauer smiled and returned the courtesy, and responded, "After a few days of nursing, my health will be better. Besides, today is the imperial meeting, so I should come over to listen to the holy teachings and see if they have any effect." Several people nearby also laughed and agreed, "Yes, uncle is right. Uncle is so loyal and highly favored, we are extremely envious of him." Li Lauer didn't care whether his words were sincere or mocking, he just took them as a compliment. Someone asked tentatively, "Uncle, do you know who is unlucky today? You haven't been here these past few days." "I'm afraid you don't know. The court is almost half empty. It's really uncomfortable." "Oh, really?" Li Lauer pretended to be surprised and responded, "It stands to reason that the evidence for the emperor's conviction is conclusive, so it can only be said that there are too many people who have failed the emperor's favor. As for what happened today, I don't know. Everything must be obeyed by the emperor." After saying that, he waved to Luz Haiheng in the distance, said goodbye to everyone with a smile, and hurried over. When someone saw him walking away, they couldn't help snorting coldly, "This man is ignorant and incompetent, but he is very tactful in his actions. I have never gotten any useful information out of his mouth." Others whispered, "That's all, the Li family is pretty good. As long as you don't provoke him, he won't take the initiative to attack anyone. At times like this, everyone is in danger, so you should be cautious." In the distance, Li Lauer met Mr. Wen and Luz Haiheng, looking at the closed palace door, looking at each other with heavy hearts. Soon, the palace door was opened and everyone filed in. After entering the court hall, Li Lauer took a glance and found that indeed, as his colleague said just now, there were many empty seats. Fortunately, there were many courtiers in today's court meeting, so they were not conspicuous. While he was thinking wildly, 3 whips were heard, and everyone quickly fell to their knees. The emperor walked out of the back hall and wore a yellow dragon robe. It was obviously the same as before, but for some reason it seemed to be inexplicably more majestic and even joyful. Everyone shouted "Long live," and they all felt this way when they stood up and raised their heads again. Li Lauer and Mr. Wen quickly looked at each other and lowered their heads. No need to doubt it, today is the day. Sure enough, at the beginning of the court meeting, important ministers stood up and earnestly persuaded the emperor that for the sake of Tianwu's foundation and the people of the world, he must kill his relatives in a righteous way. A series of more than a dozen people spoke impassionedly and well-founded, and they wished they could force the emperor into a corner. At this time, Ding Beiho actually stood up. Everyone thought that he wanted to speak for the Queen Mother. After all, no one in the court knew that he was the Queen Mother's assistant. When he was still in Jiangbei, he had military power and overwhelming power. Fortunately, when he arrived in the south of the Yangtze River, he was seized of power by the Marquis of Xinting, and he was reduced to guarding the city gate. Privately, I don't know how many people feel relieved. Even these days, many people are waiting for him to suffer misfortune. I didn't expect that he would stand up and support his master at this time, which can be regarded as a kind and righteous thing. As a result, Marquis Dingbei said, "Your Majesty, I want to sue the Queen Mother for colluding with the barbarians to invade Tianwu. Also, the Queen Mother conspired with people overseas to establish yaokai, and poison Tianwu heroes with hibiscus ointment, with the intention of taking control of the government and subverting the general rule." In the main hall, there was deathly silence for a long time, and then it exploded like a pan of oil spilled with water. What happened? Dingbao rebelled. Did I hear wrongly? Everyone was surprised that Dingbao took the initiative to rebel against his master, but they didn't pay much attention to the charges he mentioned. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1063. Chapter 1063. The Emperor's plan failed again. After all, the incident in Yaokai was so fierce, and everyone had guessed that the person behind it was extremely powerful and courageous. As for the whole Xian dynasty, there is no one else but the Queen Mother who is bold and short of money and wants to control the lifeblood of each family. Everyone knew about colluding with the barbarians when the capital was moved, and I don't know how many people cursed the Queen Mother in private. Otherwise, even after more than 10 years in Jiangnan, the Queen Mother would not be able to slowly fall into silence, and she would lose most of her power, just because she lost the hearts of the people. The reason why the Queen Mother has not been punished is because there is no evidence. The Emperor, who was sitting on the dragon throne, saw that everyone had gone off topic and glanced at Manager Yi. Manager Yi immediately shook his fly whisk and shouted, "Quiet!" The courtiers quickly put away the blazing fire of gossip, shrank their necks, and continued to watch the show. Marquis Dingbei, do you know how serious a crime it is to frame the Queen Mother? Do you have evidence for your accusation? If not, just talk nonsense, and I will definitely not spare you. Your Majesty, Marquis Dingbei knelt on the ground, kowtowing loudly. His expression was so determined that anyone who saw him felt that he had been greatly wronged. Your Majesty, I am loyal to your Majesty by eating your emoluments today. I would rather be punished by your Majesty than say a few words. As the mother of a country, the Queen Mother not only failed to do anything for Tianwu, but secretly colluded with the enemy to destroy the foundation of Tianwu, causing the people to become homeless and their relatives to be separated. The hasty move of the capital almost destroyed the country, which is a heinous crime. And that hibiscus ointment, it almost dragged all our young heroes from Tianwu into and became the devil's lackeys. The Emperor cares about the love between mother and son and values filial piety, but the Queen Mother does not take the Emperor into consideration at all. Otherwise, how could she make the Emperor so sad and embarrassed? I have to say that Dingbao said these words very well, which made the Emperor sigh and nod slightly. Dingbao kept up his efforts and finally came up with his trump card. I have conclusive evidence, including the Queen Mother's letter of collaborating with the enemy, and the former chief steward of Yaokai. I just need to wait for the Emperor to interrogate clearly, and everything will be revealed. I beg the Emperor to give the world an explanation, and also give Tianwu Shenxi a chance. As Dingbao spoke, he began to kowtow again. The courtiers were stunned for a moment, then looked up to see the Emperor looking at them as well. They finally woke up and it was time for group performances. So, everyone knelt down and shouted loudly, "Please give the Emperor an explanation and give Tianwu a chance." Everyone's foreheads were pressed against the cold floor tiles, and even a fool could figure it out. The evidence that Dingbao possesses may have been given to him by the Emperor. All the preparations before were just for today's fatal blow. Li Laoer can't hear everyone's voices. If he hears them, he will definitely ask them to remove the words Xu. Because those evidences were not given by the Emperor, but were obtained by their family. Jiaxi and Jian found them all the way from overseas. But the Li family didn't want this big credit, so they handed it over to Dingbei Ho at an advantage. The Emperor looked as if he was overly shocked but had finally made up his mind. He stood up directly and said, "Now that the matter has come to this, if we don't verify it, I will lose my trust to everyone in the world, and I may have to be an unfilial son today." After saying that, he ordered, "Surround Shaokong Palace. I want to personally ask the Queen Mother why she is doing this." As a result, Eunuch Feng hurriedly ran over from the back hall at this time and shouted, "Your Majesty, something happened. The Queen Mother committed suicide." "What?" Everyone was startled, and the Emperor even frowned and looked at Manager Yi. This was really beyond his expectation. Who made the move in advance, or did the Queen Mother know about the previous arrangements and committed suicide in anger? Manager Yi immediately led people to Shaokong Palace. Everyone in the court lowered their heads and shrank their necks for fear of being affected. Perhaps Manager Yi swung his legs into Hot Wheels, but he didn't keep everyone waiting for too long. He hurried back and brought a last letter from the Queen Mother. The Emperor quickly opened it and looked at it carefully. His expression was very complicated. The Queen Mother has been trapped in Shaokong Palace for so long, isolated and helpless, and has no hope. Moreover, courtiers have been liquidated one after another in the past few days, all of which were under her hands. She would have been too stupid to have guessed that the Emperor would attack her today. So she tried to find a way to get out of trouble, wrote her last words, and hung herself from the rafter. Not only did he not give the Emperor a chance to take revenge, he also left himself a decent body. The Emperor gritted his teeth with hatred. He had been oppressed for half his life and endured humiliation. How could he let the culprit die so easily? He wanted her to be tortured and tortured so much that she would go crazy with rage and die. But his plan failed again. After enduring it for a long time, he finally calmed down and said, "The Queen Mother finally confessed to all her crimes, and then committed suicide out of fear of the crime." The courtier roared and started talking again. The Queen Mother is like a sword hanging over Tianwu's head. Although she has faded out of the court in the past 10 years, everyone knows that she has the ability to disrupt the government at any time. Even now, the Emperor has eliminated many of the Queen Mother's men time and time again, but those who are neutral still feel that the Queen Mother may not necessarily lose. But now such a person died suddenly. The sharp sword hanging over Tianwu's head is gone. No one knew how to react. Easy. Regret. Do not believe. Happy. At this time, Ding Beiho actually shouted loudly, "Your Majesty, although the Queen Mother committed suicide out of fear of crime, the guilty officials who helped the Queen Mother interfere in the government affairs and communicated with the enemy country cannot be let go, and they must still be investigated strictly. And I have evidence here. There was a very important person who conspired with the Queen Mother at that time, even in the harem." When these words fell to the ground, there was no doubt that the fire was cooking oil, and it was almost going to blow up the entire court. Some elderly ministers, whose eyesight had turned dark, tried their best to hold on and wanted to hear a few more words. The rest of the civil and military officials didn't know what to say. They expected that today's court meeting would be exciting, but they didn't expect that the pace would be so tight. The Emperor slapped the table, as if he was also very angry, and asked, "Marquis Ding Bei, please speak clearly. If you dare to make false accusations, I will punish you severely." Ding Beiho is usually timid, but today he seems to have taken some medicine. He actually raises his head and chest, with a righteous look on his face. "For the sake of Tianwu's foundation and for the Emperor not to be deceived, I dare not deceive in the slightest. The person I am talking about is the noble concubine of Ronghua Palace. The correspondence between the Queen Mother and the barbarians was all sent out of the palace with the help of the concubine. Contacting those who were liquidated, most of the courtiers met their wives through the imperial concubine. The imperial concubine is deeply loved by the Emperor, but she is so ungrateful, unfaithful, and unjust. Please punish her and set a warning for others." The imperial concubine is the Queen Mother's staff. The imperial concubine was also involved in colluding with barbarians and forming cliques for personal gain. If it is true, the imperial concubine is definitely doomed. It is a small thing to fall out of favor. It is normal to be left in the palace or to die. The second prince has a mother like this, can he still be crowned prince? The courtiers who had previously shown their support for the second prince were the first to panic. "Sorry, my dear friends, the update is late. I have a problem with my lumbar disc, so I was delayed in getting the injection. Try to be on time tomorrow." End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1064. Chapter 1064. A big prince fell from the sky. But those ministers who had been watching cautiously felt strangely happy in their hearts. Previously, the concubine was full of noble concubines, and the second prince was attached to it. Whenever big things happen, you need to be calm. Being prudent is the only way to survive in the court. Lu Haiheng couldn't bear it any longer. He took advantage of the chaos to get close to Li Laoer and exclaimed in a low voice, "Today, we are planning to catch them all in one fell swoop." Li Laoer looked a little complicated and whispered, "Just wait, the big thing will happen later. Remember, no matter what happens, don't talk nonsense, and be sure to watch your mouth." Lu Haiheng was frightened after hearing this, and wanted to ask again, but was pushed by Li Laoer, so he could only return to his seat. I don't know whether it's because the emperor is afraid that something will happen again, or because he doesn't need to take it too seriously no matter how favored he is. With almost no hesitation, he opened his mouth to convict the imperial concubine. Not only will he be thrown into the cold palace, he will also not be pardoned at any time. This actually surprised the courtiers. Some old officials even took the initiative to intercede for the sake of the stability of the court. "Your Majesty, please think twice. This matter needs to be verified carefully. After all, the imperial concubine is the biological mother of the second prince. The second prince is your only grown prince, and he may inherit Tianwu's country in the future. He cannot have a mother and concubine who makes mistakes and ends up in the cold palace, otherwise it will be recorded in the history books and will be criticized by future generations." But the emperor was extremely determined. No matter how the old ministers tried to persuade him, he decided to surrender. There was an old minister who really thought about Tianwu and almost fell ill. "Your Majesty, you are the only prince and the best candidate for the prince, but you can't do this." The emperor smiled, straightened his back, and the pride in his expression was almost overflowing. "Who said I am the only prince? Who said the second prince is the best candidate?" After saying that, he suddenly stood up and looked at the entrance to the apse. Manager Yi understood and immediately walked over, leading a young man over. The man is less than 20 years old, with plump appearance, thick eyebrows and big eyes, a high nose and thin lips, and a three-dimensional face profile, which is both heroic and handsome. He wore a black embroidered dragon robe and a gold crown on his head. He was tall and walked with nobility, unbridled and flamboyant. "Who is this?" Everyone was so shocked that they opened their mouths wide, but no sound came out. Especially Mr. Wen and Lu Haiheng, their eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and they wished they had to use all their strength to suppress their racing hearts. The two of them looked at Li Laoer together, only to see that he was as surprised as everyone else. But they were so familiar that they could easily see the traces of Li Laoer's performance. This old fox, he must have known it a long time ago. Must. Li Laoer opened his mouth and tried his best to be a good actor. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of the two people's expressions, and I smiled bitterly in my heart. Can he say that he is not particularly sure? Even if I am sure, I don't have the guts to say it. The emperor has kept a big secret for many years. Whoever gets involved will die. He doesn't think that his neck is made of fine iron and is not afraid of being cut. Furthermore, the most important thing is that he said that he was in charge of the family shop and would be in charge of Tianwu in the future. People may think he is crazy. The emperor on the dragon throne was extremely satisfied with the reaction of the courtiers. After many years of holding back and planning, I finally feel proud at this moment. Dear friends, This is my eldest prince. He did not die unexpectedly at that time, but an enlightened monk said that he was in trouble, and he had to leave the palace to live alone, and then take him back after he was 18 years old. Although he has lived among the people for so many years, I have arranged for many great Confucians to teach him, and he has also seen the hardships of people's livelihood. I believe that he will be the most outstanding successor and will lead Tianwu to a prosperous age. The Kintian supervisor has calculated that the weather will be very good in half a month. I will personally confer the crown prince title on the eldest prince. I hope that all of you, dear friends, will continue to support the prince and do your best for Tianwu as you are loyal to me in the future. The courtiers understood every word, but they still couldn't understand it when put together. The queen mother has committed suicide, the imperial concubine has entered the cold palace, and the second prince has no hope of ascending to the throne. The eldest prince is not dead, he is back with great force. The eldest prince will soon be crowned prince. This is like turning your hand into clouds and turning your hand into rain. The whole world and the court have been tricked by the emperor. Everyone's heart is like riding a roller coaster, going up and down, unable to calm down at all. At this time, Li Lao winked at Yushi Wen and Luz Haiheng, then knelt down and shouted, "Your Majesty! Congratulations to the Crown Prince for returning to the palace." Yushi Wen and Luz Haiheng also quickly knelt down and shouted, "Your Majesty, congratulations to the Crown Prince for returning to the palace." Everyone was awakened by these two shouts. Seeing the smiles on the faces of the emperor and the prince in front of the dragon throne, they all secretly regretted it. Why was it so late that Li Lao took the lead? So, in the blink of an eye, everyone in the court fell to their knees. Whether it was true or false, everyone pretended to be surprised. "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, congratulations to the Crown Prince on his return to the palace. It is truly a blessing for Tianwu to have such an outstanding prince. The prosperous age of Tianwu, the future is promising." Ding Beiho especially shouted loudly, and he even didn't forget to gouge Li Lao out a few times. He took refuge in the emperor and became the emperor's sharp weapon in killing the queen mother and concubines. I thought that he had the greatest merit and would definitely be the most relied upon by the emperor in the future. Who would have thought that in the end, Li Lao would steal the spotlight? Li Lao lowered his head, humbly and respectfully, as if he could not feel the overt or covert gazes of everyone at all. But soon, no one was interested in paying attention to him anymore. Because the emperor had been waving the stick all morning and finally thought of giving everyone a sweet date. Dear friends, the prince has been away from home and has not yet been engaged. I plan to choose a concubine for the prince after the crown prince ceremony. If you have a dignified and beautiful girl in your family, I wonder if you would be willing to part with her. Everyone had been dizzy all morning, and suddenly they were woken up by this big pie. Different from trying to curry favor with the second prince, there are still risks, and one needs to be secretive and covered. Now that the emperor has established a prince and publicly selected his concubine, he has simply built a road to the sky for everyone. As long as the girl in the family is strong enough and takes the position of crown princess, she will be a proper queen from now on. The mother of a nation. The courtier, who had a girl of the right age at home, was so happy that he almost jumped 3 feet high. Even those who don't have a daughter at home quickly plan to adopt one from the clan, or simply buy a few beautiful ones from outside and make a ready-made one. Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty, it is an honor for me. Yes, the emperor is far-sighted. If the prince gets married as soon as possible, and the branches and leaves spread, the Tianwu Zhongshan society will definitely be more stable. In the court hall, there was another chorus of praises and praises. The prince stood on the side of the dragon chair, listening quietly, with a just right smile on his face, neither talking too much nor being credulous, perfectly playing the role of a calm prince. This actually made some veterans feel more favorably. Although he grew up among the people, this prince looks really good. Soon, the emperor announced the dismissal of the dynasty, and then left several important ministers to speak in the imperial study. In addition to the 6 ministers, there are also Dingbiu and Li Laoer. Although Dingbiu is not popular with others, his fighting prowess has been noticed by everyone. But Li Laoer was a bit awkward among them. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1065. Chapter 1065, All the good things go to the Li family. Some people have speculated on what role the Li family played in today's big change. The emperor simply trusts the Li family. And they didn't wonder for too long. After the prince sat down for the emperor, the first thing he said was to raise his hands to Li Laoer and said, "How is Mr. Li doing lately? In the past many years, my highness was out observing the public sentiment, and it was all up to my uncle to take care of him." Li Laoer stood up in a hurry and made a big salute, feeling extremely frightened. "His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has betrayed his ministers. He did not know your identity at the beginning and did not take good care of you. I hope the Crown Prince will forgive you." The prince helped him up with his own hands and said with a smile, "Don't worry, uncle, the years in Rujintan were the most relaxing and happiest days for my highness." Li Laoer lowered his head and couldn't answer the conversation, so he just kept laughing. The emperor waved his hand and greeted the prince with a smile, "Come and sit down, I am worried about you being outside." Fortunately, the Marquis took the Li family to the south of the Yangtze River and found Broken Gold Beach. Nowadays, everyone is envious of Broken Gold Beach for its wealth. Speaking of which, it's also a part of your hard work. The prince nodded and said with a smile, "My son took the opportunity to take care of the princess's business and traveled all over the country. He saw a lot of local customs and people, and also experienced the sufferings of the people. Thanks to my father's wisdom for choosing a good place like Broken Gold Beach for me to settle down." Everyone listened from beginning to end and finally understood what was going on. When they looked at Li Laoer, their eyes started to turn red. They were still racking their brains, thinking about how to get close to the prince. As it turned out, the Li family was actually sneaky and had already taken action. The prince grew up in Sujintan and has been taking care of business for the princess. This can no longer be said to be from the dragon, but from raising the dragon at home since childhood. Moreover, the prince didn't hide it now. He said it openly because he planned to remember the love of the Li family. It can be said that based on this old relationship, as long as the Li family does not rebel and does not put the saber on the royal neck, they can walk sideways in Tianwu and enjoy the glory and wealth as they please. Ding Beiho's fists were clenched with veins. Every good thing has been taken advantage of by the Li family. He is really unwilling. He rolled his eyes and said as if he was joking casually, "I heard that the princess is very good at doing business. Whether it is Bianjian, Hot Pot Restaurant or Beguyuan, she makes a lot of money every day. I think His Highness the Prince has done a lot of business before. Are you tired?" These words come from a bad person. The Li family is right in taking in the prince, but they also treat the prince as a slave. If the prince is young and cares about his face, he may feel uncomfortable because of these words. But if this kind of discomfort becomes too much, maybe his gratitude and support for the Li family will turn into hatred and boredom. If the Li family is regarded as a stain on his past, then there is no need for the Li family to exist. Several important ministers frowned slightly, not happy that Dingbiu was like this. But Li Laoer didn't seem to hear half of it. He still lowered his eyes and smiled gently and humbly. The prince glanced at Dingbei Marquis and responded calmly, "Dingbei Marquis is right. If the princess's business is good, the requirements will naturally be strict. Therefore, my highness also wants to thank the county bishop for his many talents. In addition, the princess also gave my highness a 10% bonus even though I later resigned from my position as steward on the pretext of going on a study tour. I still received more than 1,000 taels of silver every month, never less than a penny. The princess is a woman, but she is so trustworthy, and trustworthy it is worth learning and emulating by many people. After all, one cannot stand without faith, right, Marquis of Dingbei? Dingbei Ho's face turned red from suppressing his anger, and he wanted to scream with anger. He just said one sentence to test it out. The prince responded so forcefully and even beat him that he was not qualified to talk about Xinyu. This was like skinning him alive in front of everyone. Li Laoer still smiled and said nothing, and none of the other important ministers were willing to help rescue the siege. For a moment, the atmosphere in the room was a bit strange. After all, the emperor still couldn't bear to bear the sword of Dingbei, so he changed the subject and said, "The crown prince ceremony in a few days, as well as the subsequent selection of concubines, will be very hard for all my beloved ministers. It is the duty of ministers to serve the emperor and the prince when they are in fear. Yes, your majesty, such a major event is recorded in the annals of history, and I have also benefited from the glory of the emperor and his highness the crown prince. For everyone to climb to today's status, ability is the most important, but smearing honey with your mouth is also a must-have skill." After a while, the emperor was coaxed into laughing. Actually, there was no major matter to discuss when everyone was left behind. They just wanted to make it clear that the prince was once the steward of the Li family. It is much better to say it openly than to speculate wildly in the future. Of course, it also paved the way for the prince to be kind to the Li family in the future. After chatting and joking for a while, everyone saw that the emperor looked tired, so they all left together. Leaving the imperial study room, on the way to the palace gate. Some people couldn't help but be curious and asked Li Laoer to inquire. But Li Laoer had already responded. He listened more, laughed more, and handed over his hands, but he spoke less. No one could open his mouth, not to mention that there was a Dingbei Marquis who was acting strangely. So until they left the palace gate, everyone gained nothing and could only watch Li Laoer get on the carriage. Li Laoer was caught between Mr. Wen and Luz Haiheng before he could sit still. He wiped the sweat from his head and begged for mercy. "I've been struggling all morning, please let me drink a glass of water before we talk. Otherwise, you will have to drink in front of my grave today next year." Mr. Wen and Luz Haiheng hurriedly helped pour herbal tea and fans. They wanted to throw Li Laoer into the ice hole to cool down quickly and then explain their doubts. Li Laoer drank half a pot of herbal tea before he breathed a long sigh of relief. Luz Haiheng immediately asked, "What happened to Gu Lagu? Why did he become the prince? Did your family already know about it? Why didn't you say anything? I almost jumped up in the court just now." Mr. Wen also said, "This is really amazing, almost like a dream." Li Laoer smiled bitterly, "I really didn't want to hide it from you, because I wasn't sure about this before, I only vaguely knew it. Even the Marquis didn't necessarily know it clearly. Think about it, the emperor raised such a big son without telling the queen mother and the rest of the world, how could anyone know about it? In other words, whoever knows will be close to death." "That's right," Luz Haiheng grabbed the remaining half of the tea and drank it in one breath, but still couldn't calm down. "Don't talk about the past, now you have to pretend not to know even if you know it. Your family should hide the prince's details more closely, otherwise if people know that the prince has worked as a slave in your house, the prince will be embarrassed, and your family will also be in trouble." Li Laoer actually laughed when he mentioned this. "There is no need to worry about this for the time being. The prince has already mentioned this matter in front of the important ministers, and he even saluted and thanked me." Dingbei Ho and the others were almost jealous with their eyes burning with jealousy. Seriously, Mr. Wen was overjoyed and praised him repeatedly, "It's a blessing for Tianwu that the prince has such a broad mind. Today is late again. I had an injection at noon and a parent-teacher meeting in the afternoon, so I have been delayed until now. There will be another shot tomorrow, it may be late, but it will definitely be given at the normal time the day after tomorrow." End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1066. Chapter 1066, Prince, congratulations on returning home. Oh, don't worry about anyone's luck. Come home with me quickly. My old man is still waiting. Luz Haihang felt relieved and thought of his own crisis. Just now I was speechless and sent someone to tell my old man that the prince has been replaced, but my old man doesn't know about the rest yet. I'm afraid he is in a hurry right now. As he spoke, he told the coachman to hurry up and go straight back to their Lu family mansion. Sure enough, as soon as he entered the gate, he saw Mrs. Lu waiting at the door. You are finally back. What happened? My father sent people to crush the threshold. We are looking forward to your return. Before Luz Haihang could say anything, the old man's personal entourage arrived again. Suddenly seeing Luz Haihang coming back, Chang Sui seemed to have met his savior. Oh, sir, you are back. Go and see the old lady. The old lady doesn't drink tea anymore. He has been wandering around for half an hour. Luz Haihang picked up the corner of his robe and ran away, fearing that his father would kick his later. Mr. Wen and Li Lao nodded with Mrs. Lu and went to the study. Although Mrs. Lu didn't know what happened, she felt a little relieved when she saw that several people looked good, and arranged for the kitchen to prepare the banquet. The sun is going to be overhead soon, so Mr. Wen and Mr. Li must be left to have a meal. Leave aside the Lu family, Mr. Lu was very surprised when he found out the identity of the prince. Just say that in Highland Palace, the third princess was already jumping around like a monkey on a horse. Gu Li. Gu Guanqi is actually the eldest prince. My eldest brother? How is this possible? She threw herself in front of Ji Yin and shook Ji Yin's arm vigorously. Gilai is your manager, don't you know it at all? He actually hit it so deeply. Who would have thought, who would have thought? Although Ji Yin had already made some guesses, she still needed to digest the answer when it was really revealed. The most important thing is to think carefully about whether you have offended the new prince. However, this matter did not bother her for long. After all, she received a dividend of more than 1,000 taels of silver last month. At any time, there is nothing wrong with being generous with money. Princess, please let me go. Ji Yin hugged the third princess with her back hand. If I keep shaking, my little body will fall apart. The third princess quickly let go of her hand, but her mouth was unforgiving. No one told you not to speak. Didn't you already know that? I don't know. Ji Yin spread his hands, extremely helpless. If I knew, would I still dare to treat the prince as a steward? The third princess blinked her eyes twice and immediately lost her temper. It's true, my father is so powerful. No one would have thought that he would let the prince be the steward. However, your family is kind-hearted and treats the servants and stewards very well, never beat, scold or treat harshly. Maybe my father also values this, so he can rest assured to leave his eldest brother at Broken Gold Beach for so many years. As she spoke, she became happy again. Your family will be powerful in the future. When the eldest brother is granted the title of Crown Prince, your family will be able to run around in Zindu. Ji Yin was not so optimistic, and responded vaguely, our family doesn't want to be king and hegemony, we just want to live in peace. It's a pity that the third princess doesn't understand. She smiled with curiosity on her face and told the good news, I heard that the prince's brother lives in Zilong Pavilion, very close to us. Do you want to go and talk to him? Ji Yin immediately shook his head and said, it's better not to go. His Royal Highness has just walked from behind the scenes to the front of the crowd. I'm afraid he has a lot of things to do. Let's not cause trouble. When it's time for you to see me, Uncle Huang will definitely send someone to call you. The third princess thought about it, and she stopped thinking about it. As a result, When the sun was about to set, Eunuch Feng trotted over to report the news. Your Highness the princess, the emperor, and the crown prince will come over for dinner soon. Please prepare the princess and the princess early. What? The father and the crown prince's brother are coming over for dinner. The third princess was excited and happy at that time. He shouted, Father still loves me the most, so he will bring the prince brother to see me now. After saying that, she repeatedly called Kaiun to find her a new dress and accessories. There was no good news, so I could only stuff Eunuch Feng's wallet and a box of snacks, and then go to the kitchen to arrange the dishes. There are home-cooked dishes that the emperor likes to eat on weekdays, and there are also dishes that Gu Li like to eat at the Li family. After finishing these tasks, she went back and changed into a clean and cool dress. So, when the emperor and the prince arrived at Highland Palace under the moonlight, they saw two girls standing in front of the door. The tall one, wearing a gold dress made of sunset and with a phoenix hairpin in her hair, was naturally the third princess. Jiyan, who was standing by her side, only wore a light blue dress with a pearl belt, which faintly reflected the pearl headband on her simple bun. It also made her eyebrows and eyes more clear. Bright. The emperor was in a good mood today. He smiled from afar and said, What are you two girls waiting for at the door? How cold is the night wind? Come on, let's go in and talk. The third princess and Jiyan quickly saluted. The third princess smiled and stepped forward to hold the emperor's arm, and responded coquettishly, Father, did you bring the prince's brother to recognize me as a relative? Of course, he is your eldest brother. From now on, Father, in short, you must not be willful in the future. If you have something to do, listen to the prince's words. Do you understand? I know, the third princess muttered reluctantly, my father doesn't trust me. First he asked Jiyan to look after me, and now he has asked the prince brother to control me. I feel so unfree. Everyone laughed when they heard this. At this time, the prince took a few steps forward and stood completely under the light of the bright lantern. He was still wearing the black embroidered dragon robe, but when he was hit by the light, the dragon pattern seemed to fly away into the sky. He smiled, but the first thing he said was the same good news. Princess, we meet again. Jiyan secretly took a deep breath, smiled and saluted, and said, Yes, Your Highness. Congratulations on returning home. The calm steward at the beginning has now successfully transformed into a noble prince. No, speaking from a longer perspective, the thin little boy who followed Mr. Zhang back then has found his destiny. The prince didn't know how he felt when he heard the words go home, but the emperor was extremely happy. Fu Niu is still the most considerate, my children have all returned home and are by my side, I really can't ask for anything more. Jiyan smiled and stepped forward to support the emperor's other arm, and said with a smile, Such a happy thing, we must celebrate it. I have cooked the dishes that Uncle Huang likes to eat, and I will warm a pot of good wine for you later. Okay, I will make an exception and have a few drinks. The emperor smiled and led the two girls inside. The prince followed slowly, looking at the surrounding furnishings from time to time, but his eyes were mostly on the front. Soon, everyone cleaned their hands, and Shuiling and Kaiun put out the food. At the end, except for manager Yi who was left to take care of him, everyone else retreated outside. Jiyan's craftsmanship is not to mention, and the food is as delicious as ever. The emperor has eaten all kinds of delicacies from all over the world, and he has been drinking medicine recently, so his appetite has deteriorated a lot. What he likes more is the happiness of having children around his knees. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1067. Chapter 1067 The Self-Righteous Truth. Now that the Queen Mother has died, for the sake of the royal family's face, she has to mourn briefly and finally find a place to bury her. The Queen was half dead, hanging on to her last breath, and would curse madly at everyone she saw. Even if he, the emperor, goes there, he will not look good. The imperial concubine was thrown into the cold palace, the second prince fell ill, and the imperial doctor guarded the courtyard. Counting and counting, now that he is in Highland Palace, he can breathe a sigh of relief. Thinking like this, he felt more and more pleased with the good news again. If this girl didn't come into the palace and take care of the third princess all day long, I'm afraid the third princess would still be unruly and willful, causing headaches all the time. Then it would be difficult for him to find a place of peace in such a huge palace. Jian was peeling shrimps when she suddenly saw the emperor giving her a chopstick of vegetables, and she was a little surprised. In the end, looking at the loving face of the emperor, we understood a little bit. Fu Niuer, what do you wish for? I'll give you a wish that comes true. The emperor drank a few glasses of wine and was extremely emotional at the moment. Moreover, he couldn't think of any calculations against a little girl he had watched since childhood. So, he said this sincerely. Jian's heart changed quickly and she smiled sweetly. Uncle Huang, I have so many wishes. I wanted to choose the one I most wished for, but I really couldn't. In this way, I will keep this wish comes true for now. When I think about it later, I can exchange it with Uncle Huang. Haha, clever little girl, the emperor laughed, but did not refuse. Okay, you can think about it before you think about it. After saying that, he looked at the prince and asked, help me remember this. If I forget, you can help me fulfill my promise. Yes, father, I have noted it down. The prince agreed with a smile, and raised his hand to serve the third princess and Jian with dishes. The third princess naturally protested, why didn't your father ask me if I had any wishes? Your wish is nothing more than to eat, drink and have fun. The emperor patted his daughter and smiled helplessly, my wish now is to marry you off as soon as possible. If someone else takes the trouble, I will also enjoy the fun. Father is partial. The three princesses started making a fuss, making everyone laugh. A table of simple home-cooked meals, 4 people, old and young, were very satisfied. After dinner, we ate jade melon together, a rare moment of harmony and joy. But every household outside the palace was completely different at this time. I don't know how many people gathered together to carefully reflect on the many changes today. The amount of information is really too much. Without rumination, it is impossible to understand what they have experienced and what they will do in the future. Several officials were sitting together, and no one picked up the tea for a long time. They are all from the same clan and are relatives by marriage. There has been bad news recently and they have not been together for a long time. Now that the storm has passed, the land is in a mess and full of opportunities. They can no longer care about it and must negotiate urgently. Our emperor has been oppressed by the Queen Mother for half his life, and he didn't expect to do such a big thing behind his back. No wonder he doesn't have many children, but he is never in a hurry. It turns out that he still raises such an eldest son outside. An official tried his best to suppress his voice, but he could still hear his surprise. Yes, a middle-aged official also sighed and agreed, fortunately, we all underestimated the emperor, thinking that he was suppressed by the Queen Mother before, and later only managed to stabilize the court with the support of Marquise Inting. It seems now, the emperor's scheming is far beyond what we can estimate. As early as more than 10 years ago, even before the capital was moved, the emperor was already making plans. Those who rushed forward early to fawn over the concubine and the second prince were in bad luck, someone gloated, who would have thought that the concubine and the second prince who are so favored are actually just a cover. The most ruthless emperor's family, one moment they were pampered and lawless, and the next moment they were in the cold palace. It's really. Now that the eldest prince returns to the palace, he will be crowned prince immediately. I am afraid he will be the first to attack those people, who made them so fawning to the second prince before. Not necessarily. I don't think the eldest prince is a narrow-minded person. Maybe he wants to be kind to these people. After all, stabilizing the government is the top priority now. Then what should we do? What else can we do? Keep your duty, do more, and talk less, and let's see how the situation turns out in the future. Everyone was talking about it, and after deliberation until the end, they came up with 2 words, go. Someone was unwilling to give in and whispered, after the crown prince is crowned, it is time to choose the concubine. We can't watch it anymore. The girls in the family always have to be sent to try. If they fall in the eyes of the emperor and the prince, the family will have more hope. Everyone was silent for a long time, and in the end they were unwilling to give up this opportunity. So, they all made up their minds to prepare their daughter well when they got home. Not only should the clothes and jewelry be good, but the daughter should also be told not to be ostentatious when entering the palace. At the last summer banquet, the imperial concubine wanted to choose a concubine for the second prince. As a result, those girls were blind and bullied Princess Kangal. She was slapped by Princess Kangal and became famous in the new capital. Princess Kangal. When someone thought of this name, his heart suddenly trembled and he hurriedly said, "It's broken, Princess Kangal is still in the palace." Everyone else was stunned. What happened to Princess Kangal in the palace? Hasn't she always lived in the palace? The man was anxious and waved his hand in response. Princess Kangal is the most beloved by the emperor, and she has almost watched him grow up. The prince once served as the steward of Princess Kangal. Will the 2 of them fall in love for a long time? The Li family has always been rude to people who come to propose marriage, and they often chase people away. Are they just waiting for the prince to choose a concubine? Are you planning to let Princess Kangal be the crown princess? The crowd seemed to have countless sunny thunders on the head, and the thunder was tender, and there was no way. No wonder anyone mentioned the princess's marriage. The Li family all said that the princess was still young, and even said that they would wait until the end of the northern expedition and the return of the Marquis and General Li. The Li family has really been waiting for this day. Treacherous, the Li family is so treacherous. That is, their family has taken all the good things, and now even the position of the crown princess has been planned. Let me just say, a person as powerful as the prince has been in the Li family for many years, no matter how well he is hidden, there is no way he can't detect even the slightest trace, right? The Li family must have known about it for a long time and secretly arranged for the crown prince and the princess. For a moment, everyone thought they had guessed the truth. Their eyes turned red with anger and they wanted to curse the Li family 10,000 times. At the Highland Palace, the emperor also felt tired and planned to go back to the imperial study. Jiyan called Shuiling, presented 2 baskets of golden fruits, and said with a smile, "Uncle Huang, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince has returned. Someone has helped you take care of the affairs of the court. Your Highness the Princess also has a brother who loves you. I will go home tomorrow. It's no good if no one is on duty over Broken Gold Beach. My medicine field is about to be harvested again, and I have to make a batch of wound medicine quickly and send it to Jiangbei along with the 3rd batch of military rations." The emperor didn't think much about it at first, but when he accidentally glanced at the prince, he suddenly understood. At this moment, he couldn't explain how he felt in his heart. "Little girl, you are trying to avoid suspicion. 2 updates are here today. Thanks to my powerful gold-swallowing beast for letting me finish writing earlier. End of this chapter." Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1068. Chapter 1068, All the women in the palace have a bad end. Earlier, the second prince was sick and lived in the imperial concubine's palace, so there was not much gossip involved. Now that the prince has returned, he is about the same age and has to choose a concubine. It is indeed easy for a little girl to cause misunderstandings when she lives in the palace. In fact, based on his thoughts, if he wanted to keep the little girl as his daughter-in-law, he would definitely be willing to do so. But the status of the Li family is still too low for the little girl to be the crown princess. After all, the crown prince wants to help the prince consolidate his power and quickly control the court. The Li family does not have this ability, nor does they have this idea. It would be a bit unfair if the little girl was allowed to become a concubine in the future. The Li family is definitely not willing either. All said and done, leaving the palace is actually the best solution for this girl at the moment. Good news, the emperor asked casually as he played with a golden fruit. Uncle Huang has watched you grow up too. Now that the three princesses are engaged, the prince has also begun to choose his concubine. What about you, do you have any ideas, or whose son you like? You talk to Uncle Huang, and if it's suitable, Uncle Huang will definitely make the decision for you. The third princess opened her eyes, and the prince also looked up. If she were an ordinary girl, her face would probably turn red with embarrassment right now. But there was no good news. She thought about it seriously and then said, Uncle Huang, you also know that our family has family rules and we will never take concubines. So, my future husband must have only one wife around me, and we must appreciate each other and truly love each other before we get married. The rest, his status is not important, as long as he has good character and a prosperous life, he does not even need to have fame. This way we have no worries, we can go out for a walk, see the great mountains and rivers of the motherland, and see a different world. When we are tired, we go home, accompany our elders, and teach our children our life is ordinary and happy. The third princess was used to hearing good news say this, so she wasn't too surprised. The prince lowered his head, making it difficult for people to see his expression clearly. The emperor laughed when he heard this. You kid is so unambitious. Isn't your life too simple? Have you never thought that your future husband will be granted the title of Marquis or Prime Minister? Uncle Huang said it was bad. Ji Yan smiled and shook his head, his eyes brighter than the stars in the dark night. The emperor worked hard to govern the country and spent all his sleep and food to pay for the government. My adoptive father, my father, and even my brothers were all fighting bravely to protect our family and country. What was it for? Don't you just want me to live such a happy and worry-free life like millions of people? If I get my wish, that would be a happy event. It means that the hard work of the emperor, my father, and my adoptive father have not been in vain. Ah! Ha ha! The emperor laughed loudly and raised his hand to rub the girl's hair. You have grown up, but your beautiful mouth has never changed. Everything you say makes sense. Ji Yan also smiled brightly. You don't know, I also learned this secretly from listening to other people's words occasionally. That day I was among the white clouds and listened to a sour scholar advising a rich man not to be extravagant and wasteful, and to buy less snacks. The rich man said that his ancestors had suffered hardships for 3 generations and accumulated a rich family fortune so that their children and grandchildren could live a prosperous life and have no worries about food and clothing. If they still have to live frugally and endure every snack, then what's the point of the hard work of our ancestors? I thought it made sense, so I used it. The third princess was also overjoyed and was extremely proud of the good news. So, I will continue to be arrogant and domineering in the future. Otherwise, wouldn't I be sorry for the support of my father and brother prince? At this time, both the emperor and the prince laughed. The emperor shook his head helplessly and joked, I regret it now. I don't know if it's okay. Let Ji Yan enter the palace. Whether it is a good thing for you or a bad kidnapping, it really needs to be verified. Haha, it's too late. It's been so long since the good news came to the palace, and my father only remembered that I have been led astray. The third princess jingled the phoenix hairpin on her head, her face full of joy and flamboyance. The emperor saw it and smiled again. After chatting for a few more words, the emperor led the prince away. Shui Ling, Shui Yun, and Cai Yun cleaned up the mess, and the third princess took Ji Yan on her arm and went for a walk in the courtyard. At this moment, the eunuchs and maids were all busy, and there was no one around them. The third princess whispered to Jiyan's ear, Jiyan, I know you left the palace to avoid suspicion. You don't want to marry the prince's brother. The little sister suddenly became smart, which surprised Jiyan. She also smiled quietly and asked, You actually saw it? Humph. The third princess gently pinched Jiyan's arm and said angrily, I'm just not as smart as you, but I'm not stupid either. You don't like the prince brother, and you don't like the palace either. You should leave the palace at this time to avoid suspicion. It's the best decision. After finishing speaking, she sighed again and added, None of the women in this palace have good results. Look at my mother, the imperial concubine, and even the dead old witch. Jiyan patted her hand. There was nothing good she could say at this time, she could only comfort her silently. The two of them walked slowly, round and round. No matter what others think, when it comes to going home, Shuiling and Shui Yun are probably the two happiest people. They ran back to the side hall almost non-stop and started packing their luggage. Clothes, jewelry, small items for daily use, pens, ink, paper, inkstones, and even small Kong screens are all neatly packed away. The third princess was reluctant to part with the good news and came to sit with her for a while after her walk. When she saw this, her face turned bitter. You two little girls are going too far. It's not like your princess won't enter the palace anymore. Sometimes she comes to stay with me for a while, or she takes a lunch break when she comes over to play. You clean up so well because you want me to stay. Does the princess sleep on the floor? Shui Ling and Shui Yun were laughing and could not say anything, but their men did not stop. Although the palace is luxurious and noble, it is the best in the world. But a golden nest and a silver nest are not as good as your own doghouse. They couldn't help but be excited when they thought of going home, surrounded by familiar and comfortable people, and not having to be careful about breaking any rules. If possible, they don't want the princess to come to the palace again. There is no good news, and I am really afraid that the third princess will lose her temper and cause trouble. So she pulled the third princess to sit on the couch, and then opened her treasure chest. The treasure box contains not gemstones and jewelry, but some exquisite little things that the masters at Zhenjiazhuang have made for her in the past few years. For example, a boat that can run by itself when placed in the water, a small fan that can rotate quickly by pulling a rope, etc. The third princess already had a bit of a naughty temper, so when she saw this, she was immediately made happy. Finally, the good news gave her 3 pieces, and she happily carried them back to the main hall. Shui Ling and Shui Yun also finished cleaning up, chattering about how they would go home tomorrow morning, and then slept outside. Jiyan washed up and thought about it before closing the window. Muju has been particularly busy these days, and today is even more chaotic. He will definitely not come over to talk tonight. But the good news is not lost, she still has business to attend to. Hearing that it was quiet outside, she entered the space, and then summoned 2 little brothers to assign tasks. Plans never change quickly. She originally planned to live in the palace until the end of the northern expedition, to serve as the family's ears and eyes and to gather the most real-time information. But when the eldest prince returned to the palace, he immediately named him the crown prince and chose the crown prince's concubine. No matter how you measure it, it's hard for her to continue living there. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1069. Chapter 1069, Raise a fox for 1,000 days, use a fox for a while. But once you really leave the palace, even if you come here occasionally, the information will not be as fast as before. So, Santiago, Xiaolu, do you understand the principle of raising an army for 1,000 days and using it for a moment? Jian smoothed the little fox's big tail, and then kissed the little green snake's forehead, smiling like the wolf grandma coaxing Little Red Riding Hood. Now that my family is encountering difficulties, I have a headache, so I have to give you an important task tonight. The little fox chirped twice, feeling very unfamiliar with his master's appearance. Based on her understanding of her master, she is afraid that it will be deceived. Sure enough, Jian scooped the little fox into her arms and began to assign tasks. Tomorrow, I am going out of the palace. I will leave you under the care of the third princess for a while. You must be my eyes and ears and run around the palace more. If you have any news, please come home and tell me in time. Do you know? The little fox tried its best to crawl around in Jian's arms, frantically expressing its dissatisfaction. Don't let it be an abandoned fox. But Jian is extremely determined and will not be soft-hearted. Santiago, are you so heartless? You have lived in my space for so many years, you can eat fruits as you like, and I have to make you dried fish, dried meat, and fish cakes from time to time. You have grown up with enough food. Zuanier, are you going to be ungrateful now and not willing to do even the smallest thing? Jian's face was full of disappointment, and he held the little fox in front of his eyes, forcing it to look at him. Sure enough, the little fox was defeated in a short while. Then, it reluctantly stretched out a paw. Jian immediately smiled and nodded vigorously. Don't worry, as long as you send the message home, I will give you 5 fish cakes, keep it without any deductions. The little fox was now satisfied, huddled in Jian's arms and said no more. The little green snake tilted its head and stuck out its tongue, still waiting for its mission. That cute little appearance made Jian immediately throw the little fox away and hold it in her hands. Xiaolu, I have to force you to live in the grass of the palace for a while, but don't worry, I will take you back before the weather gets colder, and I will keep you safe. Xiaolu tilted her neck and continued to stick out her tongue. Seeing that it didn't object, but didn't seem to understand much, Jian decisively gave up and turned to give instructions to the little fox. Sanjo, I'm keeping an eye on Little Green these days, don't let him bite or get lost maybe. Before Jian finished speaking, she really didn't want to use Xiaolu for a day. After all, Xiaolu's exit would definitely take away a life, and it wouldn't be able to survive itself. But things are unpredictable and no one can predict the future, so we still have to make preparations. Sanjo's suppression of Xiaolu was engraved in Xiaolu's bones. After all, he had been locked in a cage for 10 years and played with the high-altitude turntable every day. He had no temper at all. So, Sanjo chirped a few times, and Xiaolu nodded obediently. Early on the next morning, when breakfast was served on the table, the third princess, with 2 dark circles under her eyes, tried her best to pick up food for Jian, as if Jian would never come again and would never eat the food of Xilan Palace. Jian was funny and heartwarming, and said angrily, "Don't let people think that we are separated by life and death. You can visit me at any time. And with this excuse, you can leave the palace a few more times." The third princess curled her lips and said, "You lied to me again. Even if I leave the palace every day, I can't be with you all the time like now." Jian waved to the window, and the little fox lying on the table jumped over immediately. Jian kissed the little fox and handed it to the third princess. "I know you will be very lonely if you suddenly leave me. So, during this period of time, I will leave Santiago to accompany you instead of me." Seriously, the third princess was so surprised that she hugged Santiago without letting go, for fear of good news. Regret. Girls are naturally irresistible to furry animals, not to mention the little fox with 3 tails, which is beautiful and full of spirituality. Who can not love it? Unfortunately, the little fox is very arrogant and seldom lets others hug him except for good news. Haha, Santiago, you will live with me from now on, don't worry, the dried fish will take care of you, I'm not as stingy as your master. The third princess promised many benefits in one breath, which finally made the little fox happy and chirped at her twice. Jiyan told him, "Don't eat too salty food for the 3 cats. Feed them no more than 5 or 6 dried fishes a day. Moreover, they are naughty by nature. They may want to run around and play. Don't restrain them or worry about them getting lost. Just don't let anyone hurt it." "Oh, stop nagging," the third princess waved her hands indifferently, "it will be my treasure from now on. Anyone who dares to hurt it will have his legs broken." As she spoke, she began to chase people away again. "The sun is so high, you should go home quickly. I will go to the imperial garden with Sanjo in my arms later." Jiyan rolled his eyes, smiled and cursed, "This is what you said, don't think about me in the future. I have 3 children, and I don't miss you." The third princess had a tough mouth and was full of momentum. Jiyan looked at it. It was indeed getting late, and it was just the right time to leave the palace. So, she let Shui Ling and Shui Yun spread out. The little eunuchs and maids in Highland Palace were reluctant to leave the palace after the good news. Not to mention how unruly and domineering the 3 princesses were before, beating and scolding them at every turn. Now the princess has become more peaceful and sensible, and they no longer have to live in fear. Simply said that after the good news came, they would have snacks and add vegetables to satisfy their cravings from time to time. Occasionally help with running errands, and get an extra small purse as a reward. The most important thing is that the princess always takes them to play shuttlecock or football, and if they win, they will get a bonus. Every time's Highland Palace is as lively as the Chinese New Year. I'm afraid it will be difficult to have such a day again. Everyone helped pack the box with a look of reluctance, and then carried it out of Highland Palace. 2 carriages were parked outside the palace gate, and Eunuch Feng was waiting beside the carriage with a smile. As soon as he saw the good news, he smiled and said, "Princess, this old slave is here to see you off. I'm afraid the court is about to go to court now, and there are many people. With my old face, you can leave the palace as soon as possible." "Okay, thank you very much, Eunuch Feng. It would be better if you could come back to Sujintan with me. I will pick some baskets of good fruits for you." Eunuch Feng smiled even more happily, but waved his hands and refused. "It won't work this time. The emperor is busy around me, so I can't leave. When I get the chance next time, I will definitely go and bother the princess." While the 2 of them were talking, the box was loaded onto the carriage. Jiyan held Shui Ling's hand and got into the first car, and Eunuch Feng got on the shaft. As for the third princess, maybe she didn't dare to come out because she was afraid of crying. If it were in the capital city of Jiangsu and Beijing, the palace gates through which married women or courtiers and their families could enter and exit would definitely not be the same as the palace gates for the upper and lower dynasties. But now we are in the south of the Yangtze River, the new capital is small, and the imperial palace has been renovated from the original palace, so there are not so many rules to worry about. So, when Jiyan's 2 carriages arrived at the gate of the palace, they met without any surprise the civil and military officials who were accompanying them to the court. 2 updates today. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1070. Chapter 1070. Your honey, my arsenic. A group of big guys riding the 11th road saw 2 carriages walking by the side, and they were naturally curious. Therefore, someone who was familiar with Eunuch Feng asked in a low voice, "How are you, Eunuch Feng? Is this the emperor sending you on an errand?" Eunuch Feng's position in the imperial study is that he is the most capable and powerful person under General Manager Yi. The most indispensable thing for him to reach his current position is a smart mind. Although he was not there to serve her last night, he could always guess why Jiyan wanted to leave the palace. For this reason, he secretly sighed a few times. If the good news can stay, and finally become the crown prince and the mistress of this palace, life for these slaves will definitely be much easier, and maybe they can have a good settlement when they are old. Unfortunately, everyone has his own ambitions. Furthermore, after having been together for so many years, he could not bear to see a kind-hearted girl who had never despised or disliked him because of his physical disability, and he could not bear to see her trapped in this cannibal palace. You know, there are only two endings for women here, either slowly withering or turning into a man-eating flower. At this moment, he suppressed the turmoil in his heart, jumped off the ground, walked with the courtiers, and said with a smile, "Yes, the old slave accepted an errand. The princess is a little homesick. Last night she said she wanted to go back and stay for a while." The emperor was worried and asked the old slave to send her away. "Princess?" The questioning official did not react for a moment, but his companions next to him couldn't help but look at the carriage, their expressions full of complexity and confusion. You must know that there is never a shortage of smart people in the world. Last night, I don't know how many people in the study room were cursing the Li family for being treacherous, and speculating that Princess Kangol was determined to win the position of crown princess. They were still thinking about joining forces to attack the Li family and seize the crown prince's fat piece of meat. As a result, she took the initiative to leave the palace. This is what's happening here. The Li family knew they couldn't win over them, so they voluntarily withdrew from the competition? Or are they wrong and the Li family doesn't even bother to compete? No one spoke for a moment, and they didn't know what to say. Eunuch Feng cupped his hands, jumped on the carriage with a smile, and the carriage quickly ran to the front. After leaving the palace gate, Ji Yin opened the car window and thanked Eunuch Feng, gave him a bulging purse, and left smoothly. Today, Li Lao did not come to court. Lu's Haiheng was busy running errands, and only Mr. Wen was among the crowd. At this moment, he could not come forward, so he waved his hand with the good news. Hearing the good news, he closed the car window directly and returned to the Earl's mansion. Wanner didn't receive the news, but she suddenly welcomed her sister-in-law back. She was extremely happy. Hearing that her sister-in-law would not live in the palace permanently in the future, she even shouted to the maids and women to clean up the courtyard. The good news did not stop my sister-in-law from busying herself, but just said, "Sister-in-law, I'll leave it alone after finishing the yard. I want to go back to Sujintan to live for a while, and occasionally I can come to the city to stay. My second uncle and my brothers are all in the city. We can't just throw away the scraps of gold like this. It will easily distract people." "Okay," Wanner agreed immediately and said with a smile, "Rujintan is your fiefdom. It's best for you, the princess, to go back. In fact, it doesn't matter whether you live in the city or in the village, it's our family's place. It's always more comfortable than in the palace." The aunt and sister-in-law talked for a long time, and after a while, Li Lao, Mr. Wen, and even Jie Huan rushed back. Everyone is happy about the good news coming out of the palace. I have to say that if there is good news in the palace, it will be much easier and faster for the family to get the news. But compared with these, they were more concerned about the safety of the good news. It's good to come back. You should go to the palace less in the future. Although the eldest prince has returned, things are still very chaotic. If you don't do anything right, you can easily get into trouble. Li Lao felt sorry for his niece and told him, "Go back to the village and live for a while. It's best to be quiet." Yu Shiwen was even more filled with cynicism. He had been in court for many years and was still not tired this morning. He even raised his hands in approval. "The position of the crown princess is just a piece of fat, and I don't know how many jackals, tigers, and leopards are watching her. If we don't care about it, we should stay far away, so as not to cause a fishy mess for no reason." Jie Huan has a simple and honest nature, and he is afraid that his sister will be reluctant to part with the prosperity of the palace, so he tries to persuade her, "Fu Niuer, no matter how nice the palace is, the rules are too big and people's hearts are too complicated. You have been our family's pet since you were a child. You are too simple and kind to be there. If you think Broken Gold Beach is boring, why not stay in Luoan for a few days? Hearing the good news, he smiled and said, "Second brother, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going back to Sujintan. I have a lot of chores in the fields and medicine shop. If I have nothing to do, I will find my little sister to go to the princess's mansion. Chatting over tea will not be boring if you keep it. Also, it's been a long time since my eldest brother and sixth brother went to work, and I never had the chance to prepare anything good for them. Now that I have an idea, I have to keep the family's fleet busy. Otherwise Uncle Hay and the others might have their bones rusted." Everyone laughed. Li Lao nodded and said, "Isn't it? When I returned to Sujintan the day before yesterday, I was stopped by Lao He and talked for a long time. They would be the happiest if they saw you coming back." Soon, Warner arranged lunch. The whole family didn't share a table. They sat together and ate lively, which was considered a small gathering. After lunch, Li Lao and others went about their business, and Ji Yan was about to return to Sujintan. As a result, Mrs. Jia, Mrs. Lu, and Mrs. Sing all came to visit. When they saw the good news, they couldn't help talking about it and praising it non-stop. "The princess is still the smartest. Yes, that is the place of right and wrong. It is best to stay away at this time. Fortunately, those people all had red eyes, as if our family had robbed their treasure." Warner and Ji Yan were curious, so they asked the elders to sit down and have a rest, drink tea and snacks, and then asked them carefully. It turned out that many people came to their home this morning, and their words were all about inquiring. "Just want to know whether the Li family intends to marry Ji Yan into the royal family, and whether they intend to compete for the position of crown princess. Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Jia are just fine, they are both eloquent and have good tempers." They sent the person away with a few words, and could reply a few words along the way. But Mrs. Seen has been recuperating for many years and rarely moves outside. She really can't withstand the attack of these people. They originally wanted to send a message to the Earl's mansion to ask for clarification, so that they could help deal with it in the future. As a result, as soon as the servants left the house, they heard that the princess had left the palace. So they packed up and hurried over. Ji Yan felt very sorry because the elders had troubled her so much. Especially Mrs. Sing, although she has been raised for a long time, her body is still much weaker than that of ordinary people. "Thank you, my aunts and uncles, for caring about me. I didn't think too much about it. I just felt that it would be difficult for me to live in the palace anymore when the prince returned to the palace, so I should avoid suspicion. How could I have thought that these people outside have such complicated thoughts? From now on, I will go back to Sujintan to live permanently. When I have free time, I will grow some fruits and vegetables, and be filial to my aunts and uncles." "Hey, that's right," Mrs. Lu trimmed Ji Yan's broken hair, her eyes full of kindness. "You are still young, and when you are looking for a husband in the future, your family will have to choose carefully. Don't be in a hurry now, such a bad guy don't jump into the quagmire." Mrs. Jia thought of the previous incident, but she didn't hide it. She said directly, "Princess, those unscrupulous things in the Feng family caused that incident before. Auntie wants to accompany you to make a mistake. I hope you can rest assured. That family, we won't be able to move around anymore, we really can't carry it. My sister-in-law is so angry that she is still lying on the bed." End of this chapter.